Hi, everyone. Welcome to Andrea Speaks Out. My name is Andrea, and in this episode, we are exploring the issue of what it's like to be a male victim and survivor of sexual abuse. I have the sense that at times men and boys seem to be excluded a bit from our conversations of sexual abuse. Although the statistics vary somewhat, it is an absolute fact that a huge number of boys have been victimized by sexual abuse. I think that there are some inherent differences between how boys and girls respond to the abuse, and I also believe that there are differences in the reasons for maintaining silences, as well as how boys may be treated versus girls once they do report their abuse. There are a lot of factors that contribute to this disparity between male and female survivors, and I really wanted to have an episode exploring this in more depth. So, to our great fortune, I have a guest here today who is gracious enough to join in this discussion with me and lend his own experiences of being abused. He not only has survived this abuse, but his healing journey has led him to a place of advocacy and leadership that is truly inspiring. So, I want to welcome John Delaney. Hi, John.
Hi, Andrea. How you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you for asking.
So glad that you are joining us today to share your background and your story and just add a perspective from a male survivor. I don't think we hear from males enough, and I'm really grateful that you're willing to do that today.
I'm happy to do it. It's definitely something that needs to be talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's just this climate of silence out there still, especially in the male survivor world, that thankfully you and others like you are just shattering it day after day.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really grateful. I wanted to just start talking a little bit about, maybe we'll start with how old you were when your abuse began.
I was about 11 years old when my parish priest started abusing me, but that wasn't the first time that I was abused. The first time I was abused was by a neighbor when I was about 6 years old. And that didn't come up until later on in life. It was something that I had blocked out. And then once the abuse with the priest started, that was really, that was intense. That went on for about 7 years. So, as I got older and started working on it all, the memory of that first time had come back up. It was only a one-time incident, but I was very young when the first abuse had happened.
Mm. One time too many.
Yes, I agree.
It's funny how I think sometimes survivors compare abuse histories and, well, it only happened once, versus even you're probably comparing your own history maybe of that only happened once versus that happened for 7 years. And it's just, I'm so glad you brought it up, Jing, in different ways, especially such a young age. That's terrible.
Yeah, without a doubt. And, like you said, one time it's just too much. It should never happen to any child. It's just, and you don't realize what it actually does to you as you grow, as you go through life and you go on about every day. It affects almost everything until you really start to deal with the abuse itself. It's just, and for me, it was a nightmare. It was just a pure nightmare for about 34 years. It was just, I don't know how I made it past, to be honest with you. I consider myself very lucky to come out the other side.
Wow. It's so true. It's so common that these, I call it our leftovers of the long-term effects. And we've talked about it in previous episodes. They're so damaging and they have such a ripple effect on different parts of our lives that once you start peeling those layers and seeing the damage that's been done, it's shocking. And
do
you look back and you're like, how did I survive that?
Yeah, I get up every day, and I don't know who it is that listens to me, but I thank God every day that I made it through and that I'm still here to be able to help out and maybe show other people that, if I can do it, you can do it, and you can get better kind of deal, because you can. I don't know that you can fully recover from being sexually abused, but you can learn how to live with it in better ways and how you react to it in different ways compared to the ways that I used to deal with it, which for me was drugs, alcohol, and violence. And that's a common thing between victims of sexual abuse. Is drug addiction and alcohol abuse becomes very prevalent in your life. So I struggled with that as well. That was a byproduct of the abuse. I mean, I went through 34 years of drug abuse and alcohol abuse till I finally got it together and got sober. And then that's
Wow.
when I really started to do work on myself and what had happened to me, because you have and then that's
Wow.
when I really started to do work on myself and what had happened to me, because you have to learn how to live as a sober person now, and then how to deal with being a sober person who was abused as a child, and how you deal with that. It's a lot to take on. It really is. Like, getting better for victims is very daunting, but if you do the work, it's well worth it.
I love that you're adding that too, that there's definitely hope. And when you're in the thick of it, it's hard to know. And, sometimes you said you question, I don't know how I got here. And it's clear that you did the work to get there. You put the time in and the work, and that's just no small task, but it really is possible. And I love bringing hope to other survivors who may not be there yet. When I want to go back to when you were 11 and going through that 7 years of abuse with was it a priest? Did you
Yeah,
mention?
it was our
I
parish
mean,
priest
parish
that had,
priest. Okay. And what would you say factors that kept you from reporting the abuse when it was happening?
I was scared. This man not only was he sexually abusing me, but he mentally abused me as well. He pitted me against my parents. He had me believing that my parents knew that I was being abused and that they sanctioned it. So once that happened for me, and I thought that my parents were allowing this to go on, I didn't feel like I had anybody I could go to.
Wow.
And that's at 11 years old. And,
Right.
by the time, say, 13 or 14 came, then it was, the stigma of, if I tell people I was abused, people are going to think I'm gay. People are going to think this about me and that about me. And that scared me, back then. And I didn't know how to deal with that. It was very hard to deal with. And there is a stigma to being a male and being abused. It's one that I don't agree with at all. I think it's actually wrong to even think that, people think you're gay if you were abused. I mean, because it's pedophilia that's the problem. So,
Absolutely. Well said.
it's that society looks at you a certain way and you feel that they're going to look at you that way. And, it's a scary thing for a child to come forward and talk. I tried to do it and I was shut down. I tried to do it and I was shut down. And the reason that I wasn't believed was because by the time I told somebody, I had been acting out for years. I was stealing. I was in constant fights. I was getting kicked out of school. And just, really, I changed from like a straight A student and an athlete to being a really bad kid. And nobody believed me because they all just thought I was a bad seed. So when I told somebody, and they didn't believe me, I didn't want to tell anybody else again because it had taken too much to come forward the first time to do it. So I just figured, I'm just in this thing alone and I got to deal with it this way. And, as I know now, later on in life, that's not the issue. I mean, I wish that I had been more vocal as a child, but I wasn't. And now it gives me the opportunity to do it now and hopefully help somebody else who may be struggling with the same thing.
Wow. Who did you report to the first time?
I told both my mom and my stepfather.
Do you remember how old you were approximately when you first joined?
I was about 12 or 13 when I had first spoken up about it. At first, like at 11 years old, I was just so traumatized by what was happening to me. I didn't know what to say, how to say it. I didn't want anybody to know. I was scared to death. I was an 11-year-old little kid. So, when I was 13, I had grown up a little bit more. Unfortunately, this abuse made me grow up in ways that I never expected to grow up so fast. And when I told my parents, they didn't believe me. And like I said, prior, in hindsight, I get it. I can see how they wouldn't have thought it was the truth because, for a couple of years now, I had been lying about everything. I wasn't very truthful. My actions were I was a very bad kid. As a matter of fact, my mom had me charged as incorrigible, and I was locked up at the age of 13 and spent 27 months in home for boys and juvenile detention centers. That was how my mom dealt with me acting out
and responding to the trauma. That's what's so difficult about adolescents when they've been traumatized. They don't act the way adults do, and the behaviors come out in troubling ways as a way to speak out in the only way they know how at the time, especially if you weren't believed. And it's just re-traumatizing. And yeah, who's going to report after being thrown in juvie? That is
Yeah.
so upsetting to hear that. And it happens often. And it seems like there's a difference. And I'd love you to talk about this more if you can, or I'd love to get your insight on it. It seems that I've read a lot of different studies that indicate that boys respond very differently to trauma than girls. And a lot of boys
Yes.
tend to act out a little bit more versus girls kind of turn inward and get a little bit more depressed and anxious and things like that, more self-harming. And I'd love to get your take on that, of just the difference in the way female versus male survivors are treated, the way they respond. What's your experience with all that?
I've been a public advocate now for 15 years, and I've talked to a lot of victims, both male and female, and the way that, the way that I was treated when I came forward, finally, I was in my 30s, my late 30s when I started talking about this. And people welcomed me with open arms. They were there for me, and everybody wanted to be supportive. But I've talked to females, and I know female victims that are friends of mine, that they didn't get that kind of support. I think females are treated so much differently than males when it comes to this. I've heard things, well, maybe, you were dressed the wrong way, or maybe you were flirty and he took it the wrong way. And nobody's ever said that to me, but they say that to females, and that's just so wrong.
Isn't that wild? There's just, so you feel like there's more blaming the victim on the female side than the male side.
Absolutely. And that's a huge discouragement for any woman to come forward, or even a young girl to come forward about that, because, people are going to blame you for what happened to you, and it's not your fault what happened. You didn't do anything wrong. They did the thing that's wrong to you, but yet people want to blame it on the victim. That's not the right way to do that. I mean, that just basically will blame it on the victim. That's not the right way to do that. I mean, that just basically will close a victim down, and they're not going to speak to anybody again about it. I mean, I know I wouldn't.
Right. Absolutely.
I spoke a few months ago about, I think there's more women out there that we don't even know about, and that won't come forward because of the stigmas and the things that are behind it when you're a woman. And I think that's very sad, because it doesn't afford women the opportunity to come forward like I did and be welcomed by their friends and family. I have people strangers that I didn't even know that embraced me and wanted to be there for me when they heard about what happened to me. And
now that's so, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just think it's so refreshing to hear that you did get support eventually, kind of a corrective experience. And yet it's so difficult when you're younger, in your teens, and your fears about reporting because of it making some sort of statement about yourself. That's the time you're trying to form all that identity. And so it's interesting that there's a twist there. And I don't know if other males know that they might be received in that supportive light. I wonder if that's common.
I think it is more now than it was, say, 15 years ago when I came forward. I was the first one in my hometown of Philadelphia to come public about what had happened to me in the church. And I was involved in the first grand jury report in Pennsylvania, and that was 13 years ago.
Can I ask you a question about that? What prompted you to come forward at that time in that manner?
My best friend, who I grew up with, I knew for 40-some years up until a couple of years ago when he passed away, he was abused by the same priest as well. And he was speaking to the investigators at the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office. And I had heard through the grapevine, through mutual friends of mine, that that's what was going on. So I reached out to him, and I decided that, he needed somebody else, that needed some kind of backup. So I wanted to be there for him. And it just felt like, maybe I need to talk about this for a change. And I've been, at that point, I've been hiding it for years and never told anybody. And I thought, okay, this is a safe way for me to do it, because it's the grand jury. It's a private thing. Nobody's going to hear about it publicly unless I want them to. And I just wanted to be supportive of somebody else who were going through exactly the same thing that I had. And he and I had known that we were abused when we were kids. We used to try to fight this priest off when we would serve mass with them. Yeah. And, we'd always try to take each other's backs. One of the things that he did as well as I is we would schedule ourselves to work with this priest on Sundays and serve mass so that other kids didn't have to take the abuse.
Oh my gosh.
I would take it because I could disconnect at that point, and
you were experienced. That's so sad.
felt like I was stronger and than most of the kids that I knew in my neighborhood. Crossed the bear. So
Hmm.
he was the same way. His name was Jimmy. He did the exact same thing that I did. And,
Did the two of
you
you
know,
talk about it together at the time?
never. It
Really?
never, yeah, it never came up in conversation. We knew,
You
like,
just knew.
yeah, there was a dozen and a half other kids in my parish that were abused by this one priest, and we all knew about each other, but nobody ever said a word about it. It just was never spoke of.
Wow. I'm just trying to envision that, of this common knowledge that someone else is going through the same thing. And it's true, when you're a kid, you don't need to, you just don't talk about those things, but it doesn't mean they're not happening. And the fact that you have this knowledge is like this nod that you're giving each other,
Yeah,
that I got
and
your back and know what he's doing
we
to you.
looked out for each other.
Yeah.
That's I we would try to take care of each other. If he was attacking one of us, the other one would jump in and try to stop it. We we did what we had to do to survive. Like I tell people, during the ages of 11 to about 17, every day I lived in fear. Every
Hmm.
day I had to figure out escape plans. I had to figure out what my next move was. 5 moves before it even happened. If I saw him walk into my classroom, I would panic.
Hmm.
And, I hope he doesn't call me out of class because I know what that's going to be. Those years were really, like you said, I grew up a lot faster than I should have. I
Yeah.
really kind of missed the childhood that, I got to watch my other friends experience, and they had such great childhoods, and mine was just a nightmare. But I did find some common ground and some ways to keep away from it. I played sports, so for me, soccer and the friends in my neighborhood were my outlet of getting away from all that. I
Yeah.
at least had 3 or 4 hours a day, whether it was soccer practice or hanging out with everybody or whatever. That was my chance to get away from what was going on
Healthy,
because
healthy
that's
outlet.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just, I mean, the abuse really just kind of takes over everything. And, it's 11 years old or 13 years old or even 15 years old. You don't realize how serious that is and what it's doing to you, but it really does affect every single facet of your life until you start to deal with it and start to talk about it and work on those issues. I mean, until you do that, it's really hard to get past it.
No, I've experienced that firsthand. You're summing it up really, really well. What do you think could help other male survivors? What do you think is missing in our culture that could help them?
I think males and females need to be treated equally when it comes to this. I
Mm.
don't see a difference between it. I don't care what your gender is. You're abused. That it's abuse. There's no difference between that to me. For me, the only guys that I had to look up to or look to were the guys from Boston, movie Spotlight. That
Yeah.
happened in 2002. And a year later, I came forward and started talking about it. Those were the guys that really kind of inspired me to kind of be public about what had happened to me, because there was nobody else out there, men-wise, that were talking about abuse by a priest. So I decided, I'm going to do this publicly. And the reason I'm going to do it publicly is because even when I was a kid, if you were a bully, I didn't, and you bullied me, I wouldn't fight you like where nobody could see it. I wanted to take you out in the schoolyard, let everybody know. And
Yeah.
let everybody see me beat the bully up. So I decided I was going to do this the same way I would have did it if I was a kid. I'm going to take it out in the public, and I'm going to hit you as hard as I can get you. And I'm going to keep fighting you, and I want people to know what you did to me. And I'm not afraid to put my name and my face to the story, because I wanted other people to see me and say, hey, I know a guy just like that. Or, like he reminds me of somebody that I know.
Yeah.
And be able to say, hey, if this guy can do it, then I can do it. For me, I'm a very religious. It seemed like I might as well use that to my advantage to try and help other people so that they could see, that this tough guy that I am and, this neighborhood guy that I am, that didn't matter, that I wasn't afraid to talk about what happened to me. The stigma that's out there is, it's scary if you're a man to come forward and talk about these things, even as, a woman as well. But for a man, it's kind of hard because like I said, you wonder, well, people are going to think I'm gay because, I was raped or abused. And I went through that for years. I struggled. I wasn't even sure what my sexuality was because I was so screwed up by the abuse. And I was afraid of being that guy. Even though I'm not gay, I was scared that people were going to think that. The older I got, that stigma went away. I don't think that way anymore, and I don't agree with that way of thinking. I think it's wrong. I think,
It's a very common reaction from
It
men,
is.
though. A lot of men have that concern
And
that
then,
they're not
they
going to be seen and
overcompensate.
have that concern
And
that
then,
they're not
they
going to be seen
overcompensate.
in their true light. And the men who do happen to be gay, who are also survivors.
Yeah, that's a struggle and a half for them. And I just don't see blaming somebody's sexuality because they're abused. To say, oh, well, you were abused, so automatically that makes you gay. No,
Not at all.
and being gay isn't a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with
Of
that.
course not. Yes, we need to make that very clear right now. This is
Yes,
not a homophobic statement or anything at all. It's just facts and
no, I'm
fears.
a big supporter of, the LGBT community. I back them 100%. I hate when I see people blame somebody being sexually abused and say, oh, well, they're gay. No, that's not right. That's wrong. And you shouldn't if I was a part of that community, I'd be in uproar in some of the things that have been said recently about pedophiles in the church. They're blaming it on people's sexuality. That's
Right.
not the case. So, that stigma's there, and it's scary as a man. So, that stigma's there, and it's scary as a man because, you're supposed to be a man, protect your family, provide for your family, be a man, that kind of stuff. And, it doesn't make you less of a man to talk about being abused. It opened the door for so many more things once I started speaking. And even before I did it publicly, I'm not saying you need to go public and tell everybody, in the newspaper, on TV, what happened to you. That's not the case. You could speak to your therapist, a friend, somebody, but you need to talk to somebody.
Oh, I agree.
It's just,
you have to
it's
get
the
the
beginning
story.
step.
Yes, you have to get the story outside of yourself. And you can do that in so many different ways. You have to either write it down, write a song about it, share with one person, write a book. It doesn't matter. Everyone's journey of healing and finding their voice is very different. And
Yes.
I don't think that anyone has the right to determine the proper way to find your voice. But what's important is finding your of you. So it's just something that happened to you rather than it defining who you are. And it sounds like you found your voice through supporting your friend and saying, this is unacceptable and I'm going to be a part of this investigation and lend my story to it so that he doesn't have to suffer alone. And it just sounds like I just have to say that you're amazing to me on so many
Thank
levels because in spite of all of your suffering, all your trauma, your whole journey, you've always been putting other people ahead of you, trying to spare them pain or trying to inspire them. And that's what sort of fueled your courage along the way. And we are so lucky you're here. We're so lucky you survived and that you're a voice. I'm blown away right now listening to you and where you are at this
Thank
point.
you. It's very humbling. And, I have a hard time seeing myself in that light. But, I'm the first guy to come out and talk about this in Philadelphia. And now the movement in Pennsylvania has grown so much. It's become
really
a national thing. So, it's nice that I was kind of on the ground floor and I kind of, helped kick this thing off. And I'm amazed at the survivor community. It's grown so much. And
It's incredible.
I have people reach out to me from all over the country. I've had people reach out to me from, all around different parts of the world and tell me how much I've inspired them to come forward. And for me, putting myself out there and laying it all on the line for everybody to see, when I have a victim or survivor who reaches out to me and tells me that I'm the reason that they're now talking about it, then everything I've been through is well worth it to me.
I agree. 100%. It's hard to describe that feeling, isn't it? Of when a stranger reaches out to you and says that your pain is helping me through mine. It's gratifying on the level like you go back in time in your mind to when you were in that abuse. And a million years you wouldn't have imagined being grateful for that part of your journey because it's making somebody else's journey a little bit better. And it does. It feels like this gift that we're blessed to be able to do whatever we can to either prevent it from happening in the first place or to just lift somebody's burden even a little bit. And you're just living that every day.
It's nice to give somebody even if they read my story, they don't even have to reach out to me. But even if you read what happened to me and it inspires you to do something about what you went through, that's the key. I mean, and for me, like you said, I had the guys in Boston, the Phil Savianos and those people who they made Spotlight about. Those guys were the groundbreakers in my abuse situation. So I had them to look up to. Yeah. And, I thought well, what about all the other people that don't have anybody around here to look up to or to look to for that voice? And, I got angry too. And, I wasn't a little kid anymore. So I wanted to fight back. And that was my way of doing it. And, for 15 years, I keep bringing things to light. And I keep telling the story because after you tell it so much, it almost kind of, it takes the sting out of it.
Yes, yes.
It's like saying a bad word over and over again. It kind of just takes the hate out of the word. It's kind of that same way. So, like it used to be for me, I'd tell my story, and back, 15 years ago, I would be drinking, I'd be getting high after I did it. I would do some media publications, and then I'd drop off for 2 weeks and go out on a binge.
Wow.
Now that's changed since I got sober, but I used to give pieces away of myself every time I would do it. Whereas now it's gotten to the point where it's not about me anymore. It's become about other people. I want other people to see that if I can do it, and trust me, if I can do it, anybody and their brother can do this. I mean, it's, I know it's hard, but once you do it, the hard part starts to slow away and the easier things start to come. It opens up doors to therapy, to getting better, because you don't have to hide anymore. You don't have to use drugs and alcohol anymore to numb and kill your pain. You're doing it another way. Like I learned that for me, at least, drugs and alcohol were a symptom of the underlying problem, which was the abuse. So once you tackle that underlying problem, the addiction goes away. And, right now I'm over a couple of years sober. I got like 26 months.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. It's the first time since I was 11 years old that I've been sober this long. I've never gone more than a week of being sober in pretty much my whole life. So, that I don't want my story to be like, like he's out there telling a story because he wants to get known. I want people to see that if I can do it and I can beat it out, that you can do it as well. And maybe somebody hears this story and they don't have to go through what I went through because they'll find their voice earlier on. And that's always my hope, is that somebody never has to go through all the hard stuff that I did to get where I'm at. If I can tell that story, just never has to go through all the hard stuff that I did to get where I'm at. If I can tell that story just a little bit more, and maybe it opens them up to talking to somebody before they start using drugs or alcohol or the other things that come with, self-harm and, all the bad stuff that you do as a victim of abuse. If it prevents that because they spoke up before it happened, then that's even better. Save somebody from going through all that hardship.
Absolutely. It's so true. That's what I'm always thinking of when I'm about to share my story, or I hit a little roadblock, I've been doing this about the same amount of time as you've, about 15 years. And there have been different times where I've had to take a little bit of a step back from advocacy work, and it's a lot. You're pouring so much into it, and you're around and involved with sexual abuse so much. It's kind of taints a little bit of how you view the world sometimes and people, and there's different times where I think, do I really need to share my story again? Are people sick of this? Is this going to make a difference? And then I hear somebody else's story, or someone reaches out, and I just get these beautiful reminders of my purpose. And it's important to take care of yourself in the journey of advocacy. That is very important, because it's a lot. But I'm with you. I'm completely with you, that if we can just work together too as advocates and help show that there's hope. That's the whole purpose of this podcast too, is just to provide hope and prevention and healing. And we all just need to stick together with it. And I love some of the things that you've done. Can you share a little bit more about some of the ways you're trying to impact the world now through your own experience, different avenues, different work that you do?
Well, actually, I own my own recovery coaching business, which I started about a year ago. Because once I got sober and started working, like I had worked on the abuse off and on, but it was like I'd go to a therapist for a couple months and stop, and then I might pick back up, and then I might pick back up, but I never really put the work in. So once I did it, like I went to rehab and then I went to an aftercare, and then I hired a sober coach for my first year of sobriety. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. So I decided to go back to school, which I did, and I got certified. So I started my own recovery coaching business where I work with people who are either for addiction or for sexual abuse recovery, because to me, it's the same thing. You're just dealing with, it's either addiction or sexual abuse. So I've been doing that. My advocacy work that I do in Pennsylvania, and not just in Pennsylvania, because I do, I've done CNN, things like that, Time Magazine. So I try to get the story out there, not to just put the pressure on the church, because it's not just about the church and it's not about me. It's really more about other people. I want to see other people come forward and not embrace, but kind of just take some ownership of what happened to them, because that's an important key, is to just, it's your story. It happened. Like, at least for me, I took a little bit of ownership into it. And once I did that and started talking about it, it just opened so many doors. My life got better. Don't get me wrong. I still have flashbacks. I still have nightmares. I still suffer from PTSD, but I've learned in the last couple of years, I've learned so many different tools to help me with how I react to when those things come up. For me, like, my go-to used to be to go get high or, open a bottle of Irish whiskey. Now it's not an option anymore. My option is I pick up the phone and I call my therapist, or I reach out to one of my buddies, or I just do something along those lines. I react differently these days than how I used to.
That's great. Good for you.
Yeah, and I wanted to give back what I learned. And, I've been in construction most of my life. I kind of blew off school when I was younger, and I just got into construction because it was easy and it was good money. But, I decided when I got sober, I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to kind of figure out a way to help other people, because I went through 6 rehabs. It took me 6 times to get this right. And I learned a lot in them 6 trips. I will say that much. But, I wanted to show people that, sometimes it doesn't have to take all those times. I wanted people to learn from my mistakes and be able to give back. There's a saying in the program, you got to give it away to keep it. I hate cliches, but I love that one because it's true. You can't keep what you have unless you give it to somebody else. So that's what started me with my business. It's doing great. I have clients. I love helping people on a daily basis. It's just very rewarding to me as much as it is for them.
That's fantastic. I love that. Can you let us know how somebody could get in touch with you if they were interested in talking to you?
Best way to get in touch with me, all my information's on my website, and it's DelaneyRecoveryCoaching.com. No spaces. Delaney is the last name. And on my website, it explains everything that I do. And it gives you a little background information on me. There's some testimonials from some people who are in the addiction world, and some other people that, put it on my website for me. You can find my Twitter account there, and it'll take you to my Facebook page as well. My phone number, everything's on there. All my info's on there. I'm not hard to find.
DelaneyRecoveryCoaching.com. That's fantastic. I just want to ask one more question about, what advice would you share with other survivors out there who have just come so far, and you're living your life in the most healthy way that you can, and you're making such a difference. You've just gone beyond your own healing. And there's a lot of people out there who have not been able to find their voice yet. Do you have any advice that you would give to them?
I have people that reach out, and I'm the only person that they've ever told. And that in itself is a first step. Reaching out to somebody that you trust, that there's no judgment going to be there. Just, whether it's a friend, could be your therapist, it could be anybody. But you need to tell somebody what happened to you. It's the only way to really get the healing to start. You don't have to be a public advocate. You don't got to blast your story all over for the world to see. You don't have to put it on social media. That's scary to some people. I just think reaching out to somebody and opening up about it is the most important step. If it's something that happened recently and you're afraid to talk about it, I think you need to, because then you can get law enforcement involved and hold these people accountable for what they've done. That's the thing. These predators prey on silence. They love it, because the more quiet you are, the more they can move around and do what they do. By you opening your mouth and speaking out to, whether it's a therapist, a friend, whatever, that gives you the chance to maybe put a stop to this, and you start taking back your life, because it's no longer a secret. They want to keep you in silence. The more silent you are, the better. If you open up your mouth and you just, for you, not, like I said, it doesn't have to be on a public forum, but for you start to break that cycle of silence and secrecy, because they love that. They want quiet, secret victims. They don't want you to talk about this, because it exposes them for the predators that they are. So I think the best advice is, 1, you're not alone. You never have been. 2, find somebody that you trust to talk about. And 3, do what you have to do, whether it's therapy, whether it's, if you're struggling with addiction, whether it's to just take a little control, but take control back, because once you open your voice, then you start to take control of your life again. Whereas they had control of you, even if they're not around you. My abuser hadn't been around me in 20 years. but yet he still ran pretty much every day of my life.
Yes.
Because I was so held up in that secrecy of it. Once you break that, you start to become who you really are.
And they lose their power in your brain. The power starts to melt away. You're absolutely right. Oh, so much good advice, John. You are very wise in your healing.
Thank you.
Very wise. Well, before we go, we have reached the point in the episode where we're going to share a phenomenal joke. Or probably the opposite of phenomenal. But do you have anything you can share with us? Do you know any jokes?
I tried to think of a clean joke as best that I could.
And I appreciate that effort.
It was really hard to come up with. Honestly, I didn't come up. I could not. I was going to Google a clean joke, but I didn't do it.
That's okay. See, you're being honest. That's good.
Yeah.
Not everybody has them. That's so funny. All right. I have one. I just heard this the other day, actually at my son's school, and I thought this was really funny. Most of mine are terrible, but this one I think is really cute. Some younger people won't understand it, but other people will get the reference. Are you ready?
Yeah.
I'm going to mess up this wording too. Let me concentrate here. Okay, you ready? What's the difference between people from Dubai and people from Abu Dhabi?
I don't know.
The people from Dubai don't like the Flintstones, but the people from Abu Dhabi do.
That's actually not bad.
I thought that was really funny. I can't take the credit.
Gotta love kid jokes.
Right? I thought that was really funny. So a lot of people
That's very funny.
might not get the Flintstone reference, but it's funny.
And if they don't.
Enough for being here, for sharing so much, just promising message for so many other people. And thanks for the courage for sharing the dark parts of yourself too. There's a lot of darkness in your story, but there's equal, if not greater, light. And that is just so inspiring to me. I can't begin to tell you how I was just sitting here sort of with my eyes wide open listening to both sides of it. And I'm excited for other survivors to hear you. I really am. And I'm very grateful for your work, for every day, your commitment to just lifting up other people. I'm very grateful for you. I'm glad you survived. I'm glad you found your truth. I'm glad you found your voice. The world needs you so much. And your journey towards sobriety and just sharing all of it with us here. Just thank you.
Thank you for having me on. I mean, the opportunity to do this is incredible. And, I hope that it is incredible. And, I hope somebody listens to this and just, even if they take away one little thing from it out of the time that we spent together, that's all that matters to me.
Me too.
For them, I hope that they find, their voice, and I hope they decide to take it back, because as scary as it seems when you're in the throes of everything, with the abuse or whatever it is that you're going through, addiction, whatever it may be, there's always some hope at the end of the tunnel. You just have to look for it hard enough. It's there.
I completely agree. Well, thank you, John. I hope you have an awesome day. And just thanks for joining us.
I appreciate you having me on. Thank you very much.
No problem. Take care. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Wow, we covered a lot of ground on this episode, didn't we? What a message of courage, of what it's like to be a male victim, of survival, emerging from drug abuse, and really some ways to find your voice and begin healing. I've been thinking, if you find that you get a bit triggered from any of these episodes, make sure you reach out to somebody for comfort and help, okay? It is not my intention at all to have people triggered by any of these episodes. But the truth is that sometimes, I don't know, we can't control what triggers us, So please make sure that you take care of yourselves every step of the way. Please remember to subscribe to Andrea Speaks Out podcast so that you can receive notifications of new episodes. I want to thank John. I want to thank all of you for your continued support and all the sharing that you've done, and for helping to make this world a safer place. I'm just filled with gratitude every single day for how many of you are making a difference out there. Have a great day, speak your truth, and be kind.